go. All right. Welcome, Sven. Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Nice that you're here. First disclaimer, I'm not used this anymore to work with Macs, so maybe I messed something up because it's confusing how Mac's working. But let's start. I will basically run through the first couple of slides because I only have 25 minutes, so I have to make it a bit quick. So let's talk about automated testing of documentation. Actually, first question, how is actually has already in their workflow for documentation like a CI setup included, or is using CI/CD for testing and deploying not only the product but also the documentation and runs something like simple or not so simple quality assurance tests of your documentation in CI? No one. Oh, okay, cool. I mean, it's not hard. It's like running CI for your normal things. And let's just jump straight into it. So that's the first part, this boring part. It's about me. I'm a DocOps engineer and work for Pronovix. I have old school sysadmin, DevOps / SRE background. I'm also involved in some open source thingies or communities like Plone. Maybe some people here in the room know it. It's CMS or enterprise CMS based on Python. And also involved in two other communities like Test the Docs and Write the Docs. And I really like to complain, and this talk is also quite opinionated and basically based on experience from various open source communities. So that may or may not fit the use case if we are working on a company. So it's first the reality check. So we all know that, so we learned it in the meantime. Writing is not that hard. Sometimes we always just write a couple of lines for documentation, but no, it's not, because you want to make sure that you reach the audience, that the audience understanding your docs and stuff like that. The same with continuous integration, basic stuff, at least if you're experienced with continuous integration or a developer, is easy, but if you're starting to build up your CI system and you're getting more and more tests into it, it can get quite complicated. And also, like always, there is no perfect solution or no golden solution. Like always, there are lots of different ways to reach your goal. It always depends on your effort, time, money, and what you need. And also, automated tests are nice, but they can fix all your issues or problems. It's only one part which can help you to make your life a bit easier. Basically, all the things like quality assurance start in your editor and after your editor with people like real humans who are trying to read, understand, and test the documentation. And then, disclaimer again, it's based on open source experience, and some of you may or may not recognize some commits to some repositories. And let's jump into it. So, I mean, we have in 2019, but actually I'm praying this since a couple of years. Documentation these days is an important part of your product. Just push your product out and say people try install it will not help you. You will not sell that because you get annoyed, or your customers get annoyed and move away. And also it will cost you lots of money because you have to spend lots of money and effort and time in help desk or other annoying things. And also, if you want to have new developers able to jump in quickly, provide them with usable documentation. It's really perfect for onboarding, because in the whole onboarding process, they can test basically the documentation. And like always, I like to say, if you have no docs, your whole product is basically broken. Yes, and also the other thing, it's important to check. People tend to forget that with writing documentations. Take care about the editors, meaning the people who basically editing your documentation. So that is really my message to all your awesome developers. It's really nice that you're trying documentation, but also try to write meaningful documentation and readable documentation. And this, for example, a really quick example. This is a code of conduct from the awesome Write the Docs community, which is awesome, and they are really nice people. And this the source. It's the restructured text. It looks awesome rendered at HTML, but at the source, well, I think there's some room for improvements, because personally, it's my personal opinion, reading that and editing that, for me, it's way harder than doing that, which is exactly the same file, but then following a markdown style guide and some couple of tiny wording style guides. It's really the same, but it follows the whole F-shape, how people tend to read source code, or basically sites or newspapers, and also it's certain line length and other stuff, so it makes it, for me at least, easier to work on stuff like that. And then, well, now we're getting to the fun part with basically checks or quality assurance. The most important thing is you need a plan, you need the ideas, you have to know actually what is your goal, what you want to reach with checking documentation. Lots of people say, oh yeah, let's do it, cool, we start checking it, but they have no idea what kind of checks do you want to have. So first we have to define a goal. Is my goal just I want to remove all the typos, or is my goal I want to have a certain level of readability? So this is really important, and also use same values of your checks. Don't start with too strict checks. If you start with too strict checks, all the people who contributing to your docs will be really, really unhappy, because basically your tests, or your CI in this case, will scream every 20 seconds against you, and it's nice for later, but if you want to have nice results and people are motivated, start slow and tweak and tune them later. Also, it's important, if it's possible, start from the beginning of the projects, also with checks of documentation, because if we have already something like, I don't know, 500 sites of documentation about the user manual, and adding then checks and trying to fix all that, it's possible, but it's not the nicest thing to do. Then also important, be strict but be friendly, so give people, if the test is failing, meaningful messages why it's failing, explain why it's failing, and send them with links to background information how they can fix it. Same as for error messages. And also important, know your audience, who's contributing to the documentation. That maybe if you work in a company, easier because you have a writing team, but if you're involved in an open source project, sometimes you really first have to know who's contributing the most, because depending on that, you may want to adjust your checks to make them on certain levels more user-friendly or less strict. And how to get it, there are lots of different ways how to get information. I like to use Grafana hooked up to my GitHub or Bitbucket repositories to give me information about my contributors, pull requests, who's doing pull requests, who's doing merge requests, and all the other stuff. Also use analytics like Matamo, Good Analytics, whatever you use, to get information about who's visiting your site, how they're coming to the site, how they're looking up content on your site, how they're searching for your site, because it also gives you a clue and an idea where it's important to start fixing up your documentation, basically. So maybe it's more important first to run checks only on a certain part of the documentation and later extend them than running on all of it. And then, really, really important, since we are also talking CI/CD, developers are your friend. Be friendly to them. Work together with them. It doesn't help if you just stand with your foot on the ground and say, I want to have it like this. So try to adopt the tools that they are using. Try to provide them with meaningful templates. And also, yeah, make it easy for them. So for Plone, for example, we created Marvin, which is our friendly helping robot, which is really nice because if people starting to write Plone trainings or other parts of the documentation, it will create your boilerplate with the title, the right RST syntax, configure checks and stuff like that. And this is nice because first is CLI, and our developers, they like CLI, but also it gives them a nice starting base to start from and move on. Also, if you run checks, first we did run checks on the whole documentation, which we'll also see later. This is nice, but to make the checks fast and quick, just run the checks on files which are changed. You don't have to check 500 pages when only one page is changed. Then, yeah, a friendly reminder, like you should know that, of course, protect your branches. If you don't protect your branches, you may end up with weird commits to weird branches, which will result in weird documentation online. If you write checks, use the best coding practice against the languages you write them in, and also make sure they're passing tests of the language. Like I already said, keep checks easy, start small, and make checks depend on each other. So just run for example, if you run an HTML deploy, make sure that you only run the deploy if all other tests before that are passing. Otherwise, you will end up deploying broken HTML. And yeah, like Doug said code, you see a small example. Do not break the build. If you break the build, of course, fix it. I have to move up a bit. And now it's demo time, which will hopefully work. First, a really short disclaimer. The demo setup is also online. I will post the link later. This is only for local usage. Don't try that on your production setup, because I do evil stuff like mounting Docker socks and volumes and doing that. It's fine on a laptop, but on production machines, use Kubernetes DC08 or install it up barebone. And basically, we have two short demos, one which we're using Travis, hopefully the internet will work, and the other one it's running locally. And this is for later, oops. And how to get my...
Do you want a mirror?
Oh yeah.
Because there's a very nice shortcut. There we go.
Where's my mirror? Okay, below, this is basically what is running on Travis and then deploy to Natively. And if you check at the moment, it will tell you that, really lovely, I love it. Well, it will tell you that basically it's failing, and because of that, we can't deploy to our website. And basically, it is failing because we have this one line 25 down there. So, and this basically it's a really minimal linter which is checking your writing guides, and we have in our style guide that we don't want to start lines or sentences with there is, and because of that, is failing. And if we remove that now. Nice. I love it.
Someone had to do a live demo.
Yeah, I know. I know, but it's also the internet. Okay, do the others test then. Blah, 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 blah. We go now. History. Come on, slow internet. Then we see it's basically it's running, and now in the meantime we have locally also set up with the drone and Getir, and here's basically a repository, and we also see that the lovely. Is it better? No. Why is that so small? So now we can see that the build is basically failing, and this on purpose. We are using basically the same checks which we are using on Travis, but then with the stricter settings. And I tend to do that. That means because personally I run stricter checks for myself locally on CI. I always have the CI locally running, And if they are passing, I know for sure that they are also passing on the main side. And the reason why I use stricter checks for myself is to really, really make sure that we slowly basically improve the quality of the docs. And we can also now just try that. That is then here. And I mean, this one will still fail because I will not fix it now. Now we see it's running. And the link is okay, hopefully, when we have internet. Man, the internet is really fun here.
So what checks are you running now?
This now, it's if you can see this one for Netifly passed, it's green, and it's deployed to the site, hopefully. Yes. For the demo, I'm running just the basic link checks and then a style check with Valolint, which is checking for spell checks, language that I don't use certain words, that I make sure I don't start sentences with there is, so, or but, certain line length, paragraph length, and check terms, and that is basically. But there's no, the possibilities are endless. For example, with Chris, the Veil setup, you can do really funny and insane things. So, and this is the fun part, but also the dangerous part, because you really, really have to think from what I want to test, because you can go really, really crazy and test lots and lots and lots of stuff, but you really have to ask yourself, at least when you start from, is that really the goal from the beginning? Maybe sure, over a certain amount of time, I want to test all the stuff, but I want to test, maybe want to start small. And also the important thing is to check, you can check the levels of testing, like is my test giving me a warning, or a suggestion, or is falling. So I, for example, start basically to set everyone to suggestion, and it's basically the test is running through, but it's telling me from, hey, maybe you want to change that word, or your line is 20 characters too long, or other stuff. And then later on, step by step, or run by run, I adjust them and move them from suggestion to error or to warning. And with then you also can define levels with errors. The build is failing and it will not deploy. With warning, you can also, or I can configure, and you can do like the spell check. If I get a warning with spell check, then fail. But if I get a warning with my line is 20 characters too long, then run through it. And then you get a whole matrix of different tests, and with the different tests, later on you can adjust them, and that helps you to improve your quality of your docs slowly. And you don't have to run like me CI locally. You can also use Git hooks or other stuff. And yeah, this site is deployed. Lovely, lovely, lovely. And this one is, of course, not having internet, but it's a same check. And if you go now back to the slides. Yeah, that was basically it. Thank you to Provenix, because they are awesome people, and actually the writing and content team, because they keep up with my ideas, and that's not always that easy, I think. And thank you all of. I want to apologize because it was a bit short and a bit really, really short, but it's 25 minutes. It's really hard to tell all the stuff in 25 minutes.
5 minutes for questions, mate. So if there's any gaps, then we go straight away.
You mentioned that it would be good to first start with simple rules and then tune them.
Yes.
But what will happen with the documentation which was written without those new rules?
We did, for example, with Plone the same, because we had lots of documentation, there were no rules. And though we started to write a whole sheet about where we want to be in the future, and then we took that apart and said, okay, this is the end goal, but now we have to rip it apart in smaller steps. And first, through reaching all the smaller steps, step by step, we will reach the end goal.
But all the documentation will fail all the checks, so it's going to be useless.
No, that is why yes and no. If you run them on all the existing documentation, yes, but how we solving it now is we run it only on the files which people are including their commit. So I have maybe all the 500 pages, but since there was only a change on one site, only the one site is checked, and you only get the result for the one site. Well, the other 499 sites, they are still bad and not improved. But by this, we are improving the documentation over the time.
Do you think your tool would have a way to test code samples we could put in documentation or be extended to do that?
Yes, it's possible. There's this one guy from Amsterdam also. He did a talk at the last Write the Docs last year. He's doing that. He has for things, basically, he wrote a plugin to do that. And there are also some experiments with having all your code examples in your own repository and test them then, only in this repository, and then include them from this code repository or code example repository into your documentation. There are different ways how to do that. All of them are still kind of buggy and not working perfect. And we also still, for Plone, figuring out which is the best approach for us. Because it should be easy-ish maintainable, but still also giving you basically results. So if you use for your hosting your documentation something like ASCII-Doc and Antora, then it's basically easier because they can fetch different repositories and combine them into one nicely rendered HTML output.
All right. Thank you very much.